Greetings everyone. We're gathered here to figure out WTF was, is, or will be. USS Iowa. Let's dive in. The USS Iowa, BB-61, is a retired battleship and the first of its class. She was the fourth ship named after the state of Iowa. With the cancellation of the Montana-class battleships, Iowa holds a unique place in history as the last lead ship of any U.S. battleship class and the only one of her kind to see service in the Atlantic during World War II. During the war, Iowa had a significant role, including a notable mission where she carried President Franklin D. Roosevelt across the Atlantic to North Africa on his way to a key meeting in Tehran. There, in 1943, Roosevelt met with British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin to discuss Allied strategy. Later, in 1944, she joined the Pacific Fleet, where she supported amphibious landings at Kwajalein and Eniwetok by bombarding enemy positions. She also acted as a protector for aircraft carriers in the Marshall Islands and served as Admiral William F. Halsey's flagship during the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay. In the Korean War, Iowa was active along the North Korean coastline before being placed into the reserve fleet, often called the Mothball Fleet. She returned to service in 1984 as part of a naval expansion plan and was deployed in both the Atlantic and Pacific fleets to counter the Soviet Navy, which had grown during the Cold War. However, in April 1989, a tragic explosion in her No. 2 gun turret resulted in the deaths of 47 crew members, leaving a lasting impact on her legacy. The ship was decommissioned for the last time in October 1990, after 19 years of service. Although initially removed from the Naval Vessel Register in 1995, Iowa was reinstated in 1999 due to federal regulations requiring 2 Iowa-class battleships to be maintained. Eventually, in 2011, she was donated to the Pacific Battleship Center in Los Angeles. By 2012, she found a permanent home at Berth 87 in the Port of Los Angeles, where she was transformed into the USS Iowa Museum, welcoming the public to explore her storied past. The construction of the USS Iowa began in June 1940 at the New York Naval Shipyard after being ordered in July 1939. She was launched on August 27, 1942, with Elo Wallace, the wife of Vice President Henry Wallace, as her sponsor. By February 22, 1943, Iowa was officially commissioned, with Captain John L. McCrea taking command. Iowa was equipped with a powerful array of weaponry. Her main battery featured 9 16-inch Mark VII guns, each capable of firing 2,700-pound armor-piercing shells up to 23 miles. For secondary armament, she had 25-inch guns mounted in twin turrets, with a range of up to 14 miles. As air power became a crucial element of warfare, Iowa was also outfitted with an array of anti-aircraft defenses, including Oerlikon 20mm and Bofors 40mm guns, to protect the growing fleet of Allied aircraft carriers from enemy airstrikes. This combination of heavy artillery and air defense made Iowa a formidable force in both sea battles and as a protector of Allied naval operations during World War II. World War II, 1943 to 1945. After being selected to transport President Franklin D. Roosevelt to key conferences in Cairo and Tehran, the USS Iowa underwent a unique modification. Knowing the president's mobility challenges after his paralysis in 1921, a bathtub was specially installed on the ship. This addition ensured Roosevelt's comfort during the journey, as using a shower would have been difficult for him. Iowa embarked on a shakedown cruise in the Chesapeake Bay and along the Atlantic coast on February 24, 1943. By late August, she set sail for Argentia, Newfoundland, in response to the threat posed by the German battleship Tirpitz, which was believed to be operating in Norwegian waters. Iowa returned to the United States on October 25 for maintenance at the Norfolk Navy Yard. In November 1943, Iowa embarked on a significant mission, carrying President Roosevelt, Secretary of State Cordell Hull, and other top military leaders, including Admiral William D. Leahy and General George C. Marshall, across the Atlantic. They were en route to Mers el-Kebir, Algeria, for the first leg of their journey to crucial meetings in Cairo and Tehran. On November 14th, a tense moment occurred east of Bermuda when a destroyer in Iowa's escort group, the USS William D. Porter, accidentally launched a torpedo towards Iowa during a drill. Thanks to quick warnings and a sharp turn by Iowa, the torpedo missed, detonating harmlessly in the ship's wake. For a brief moment, Iowa's crew feared an assassination attempt and even trained their guns on the destroyer. Iowa successfully completed the mission, returning President Roosevelt safely to the United States on December 16th. Before leaving the ship, Roosevelt addressed the crew, praising Iowa as a happy ship and expressing his appreciation for their service. He encouraged them with his parting words, "Good luck, and remember that I am with you in spirit, each and every one of you." Service with Battleship Division 7. In early 1944, the USS Iowa took on the role of flagship for Battleship Division 7 under the command of Admiral Willis A. Lee. She departed the United States on January 2nd, heading for the Pacific Ocean, and crossed the Panama Canal just a few days later. Her first major mission was supporting airstrikes during the campaign for the Marshall Islands. From January 29th to February 3rd, she played a crucial role in assisting Rear Admiral Frederick C. Sherman's Task Group 58.3 in attacks on Kwajalein and Eniwetok atolls. Later, Iowa joined an operation against the significant Japanese naval base at Truk in the Caroline Islands. On February 16th, she, along with her sister ship New Jersey, carried out an anti-shipping sweep around the area to intercept enemy vessels attempting to escape. In this action, the two battleships successfully sank the Japanese light cruiser Katori. Continuing her Pacific campaign, Iowa participated in strikes on Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and Guam in the Mariana Islands in February. She joined the bombardment of Mili Atoll in March, despite being hit by 2 Japanese shells, which caused only minor damage. By the end of April, Iowa was supporting air raids on Hollandia and Aitape in New Guinea, followed by another mission at Truk and bombardment of Ponape. During the opening stages of the Mariana and Palau Islands campaign, Iowa provided vital protection for American aircraft carriers during strikes on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam. In mid-June, she bombarded enemy positions on Saipan and Tinian, taking out a large Japanese ammunition dump. Later that month, she played a key role in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, helping to repel several Japanese air raids and downing enemy aircraft. After supporting operations in the Marianas and landing operations on Guam, Iowa moved to the 3rd Fleet. She supported the landing on Paleliu in September and protected carriers during airstrikes on the central Philippines, preparing for the invasion. By October, she was off the coast of Okinawa, conducting airstrikes and supporting landings on Leyte Island. The Battle of Lake Gulf saw Iowa in action against the Japanese forces attempting to disrupt American landings. She participated in attacks against Admiral Kurita's Central Force in the Sibuyan Sea, mistakenly believing the force had been neutralized. As a result, she and Task Force 38 pursued the Japanese Northern Force, only to be called back when the Central Force re-emerged near Samar, attacking American escort carriers. Although Iowa did not engage in direct combat, her presence provided essential cover for the retreating American forces. In December 1944, while sailing east of Luzon, Iowa, and the fleet faced a new enemy, Typhoon Cobra. The storm hit unexpectedly, catching many ships unprepared in rough seas as they tried to refuel. Tragically, 3 destroyers capsized, and numerous other ships, including 5 aircraft carriers and a cruiser, were heavily damaged. About 790 sailors lost their lives, with many more injured. Despite the chaos, Iowa reported no injuries among her crew, but lost one of her float planes and suffered damage to one of her shafts. Iowa returned to the United States on January 15, 1945 for repairs in San Francisco. During this overhaul, her bridge was enclosed, and new radars and fire control systems were installed, preparing her for the next phase of her service. Bombardment of Japan. In March 1945, the USS Iowa set sail for Okinawa, arriving on April 15th to take over from her sister ship, New Jersey. From April 24th, she supported carrier operations that were crucial for securing air superiority, helping ground forces in their intense battle for the island. By late May, Iowa shifted focus to southern Kyushu, where she supported airstrikes until mid-June. Then she moved north to target the Japanese home islands of Honshu and Hokkaido. On July 14 and 15, Iowa's guns pounded Muroran, Hokkaido, aiming at steel mills and other strategic targets. She continued this campaign with a bombardment of Hitachi on Honshu from the night of July 17th into the next day. In late July, her firepower was directed at the island of Kahulawe. Iowa's relentless support of fast carrier strikes continued until the very end of the war on August 15th. On August 27th, Iowa, along with her sister ship Missouri, entered Sagami Bay to supervise the surrender of the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. Just 2 days later, she sailed into Tokyo Bay with the occupation forces. For the surrender ceremony aboard Missouri on September 2nd, some of Iowa's crew temporarily transferred to Missouri to assist with the event. As Admiral Halsey's flagship for this historic occasion, Iowa played a pivotal role in the proceedings. After the ceremony, Iowa stayed in Tokyo Bay as part of the occupation force. She soon became involved in Operation Magic Carpet, the massive effort to bring American troops home. She also helped liberate U.S. prisoners of war before finally leaving Tokyo Bay on September 20th, heading back to the United States. Post-World War II, 1945 to 1949. After World War II, the USS Iowa reached Seattle, Washington on October 15, 1945. She then sailed down to Long Beach, California, where she was involved in various training operations. In 1946, Iowa returned to Japan to serve as the flagship for the Fifth Fleet before heading back to the United States on March 25th. Resuming her role as a training ship, she carried out drills and maneuvers, training Naval Reserve units and midshipmen. In October 1946, Iowa underwent a significant overhaul. The ship received an upgraded SK-2 radar system, though several 20mm and 40mm anti-aircraft gun mounts were removed. Then, in July 1948, she participated in a dramatic exercise following the Bikini atomic tests. Alongside other naval units, Iowa was tasked with targeting the old battleship Nevada. Despite multiple shell hits from Iowa, a destroyer, and a heavy cruiser, Nevada remained afloat. Finally, it took a single aerial torpedo hit to sink her about 65 miles from Pearl Harbor on July 31, 1948. By September 1948, the post-war reduction in military forces led to Iowa's deactivation. She was placed into reserve in San Francisco and officially decommissioned on March 24, 1949, joining the United States Navy's Reserve Fleet. Korean War, 1951-52. When North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, the United Nations quickly responded with a call for military intervention. President Harry S. Truman ordered U.S. forces stationed in Japan to move into South Korea, along with additional troops, tanks, aircraft, and naval forces from the U.S. to support the effort. As part of this mobilization, the USS Iowa was reactivated on July 14, 1951, and recommissioned on August 25th. Under the command of Captain William R. Smedberg III. By March 1952, she was on her way to the Korean Peninsula. On April 1st, Iowa relieved her sister ship, the USS Wisconsin, and became the flagship of Vice Admiral Robert P. Briscoe, commander of the 7th Fleet. Just a week later, on April 8th, Iowa saw her first combat action of the war, targeting North Korean supply lines near Wonsan and Sumjin. The following day, she continued her bombardment, focusing on enemy troops, supply areas, and suspected artillery positions around Suwon-dan and Kojo. On April 13th, Iowa supported South Korea's I-Corps by destroying enemy positions, including 6 gun emplacements, a division headquarters, and killing around 100 enemy soldiers. The next day, she entered Wonsan Harbor to shell warehouses, observation posts, and railroad marshalling yards. On April 20th, Iowa carried out her first operation above the 38th parallel, targeting railroad lines at Tanchon, destroying 4 tunnels. Afterward, she sailed to Cheondong and Kosong for a 2-day bombardment, hitting more North Korean positions. Following her sister ship Missouri's example, Iowa arrived near the North Korean industrial center of Chongjin on May 25th, about 55 miles from the Russian border. There, she shelled industrial and rail facilities before moving south to support the U.S. X-Corps, again targeting railroad tunnels and bridges in Sumjin. By May 28th, Iowa rejoined the main fleet, heavily shelling islands in Wonsan Harbor. Throughout June, Iowa's guns fired on targets across various locations, including Myeong-do, Tanchon, and Chongjin, as well as the ports of Hungnam and Wonsan, providing essential support to United Nations and South Korean forces. On June 9th, a helicopter from Iowa rescued a downed pilot from the USS Princeton, which was operating with Task Force 77 in bombing missions against North Korean supply lines and providing close air support for ground forces. In July, Captain Joshua W. Cooper took command of Iowa for the remainder of her Korean War service. On August 20th, Iowa came to the aid of the destroyer USS Thompson, which had been hit by Chinese artillery. She took aboard 9 wounded sailors and covered Thompson's retreat to safer waters. A month later, on September 23rd, General Mark W. Clark, Commander-in-Chief of United Nations forces in Korea, boarded Iowa to witness her guns in action, demolishing a large enemy ammunition dump in Wonsan. In late September, Iowa participated in Operation Decoy, a tactical maneuver designed to lure enemy troops into Kojo, where her powerful guns could engage them. Throughout October, Iowa continued her role as the 7th Fleet flagship, executing 43 gun strikes across multiple locations in North Korea, including Wonsan, Songjin, Kojo, and Hungnam. During these operations, she fired over 16,000 rounds at enemy targets, earning her crew the United Nations Service Medal and the Korean Service Medal with 1 Bronze Star. Post-Korean War, 1953 to 1958. After the Korean War, the USS Iowa continued to serve in various training and operational roles. In July 1953, she set sail with midshipmen aboard for training in Northern Europe. Shortly after, she participated in Operation Mariner, a significant NATO exercise where she served as the flagship for Vice Admiral Edmund T. Wooldridge, commander of the Second Fleet. Following this exercise, Iowa operated in the waters near the Virginia Capes. In September 1954, she took on a new role as the flagship of Rear Admiral R.E. Libby, who was then commanding the Battleship cruiser force for the U.S. Atlantic Fleet. From January to April 1955, Iowa embarked on an extended deployment to the Mediterranean, serving as the flagship for the commander of the 6th Fleet. After this tour, she began a midshipman training cruise on June 1st, and upon returning, she underwent a 4-month overhaul in Norfolk. Once the maintenance was complete, she resumed training cruises and operational exercises. In early January 1957, Iowa left Norfolk to rejoin the 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean for another tour of duty. Following this, she embarked on a South American training cruise with midshipmen and took part in the International Naval Review off Hampton Roads, Virginia, on June 13th, showcasing her capabilities alongside other naval vessels. In September 1957, Iowa headed to Scotland to participate in NATO's Exercise Strikeback, further demonstrating her versatility and commitment to joint operations. After completing the exercise, she returned to Norfolk on September 28th and then sailed to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard on October 22nd. On February 24, 1958, Iowa was decommissioned and joined the Atlantic Reserve Fleet in Philadelphia, marking the end of this chapter in her service. Reactivation, 1982 to 1990. In the early 1980s, as part of President Ronald Reagan's and Secretary of the Navy John F. Lehman's plan to expand the Navy to 600 ships, the USS Iowa was brought out of retirement. In 1982, she was towed by USNS Apache to the Avondale Shipyard near New Orleans, Louisiana, for a comprehensive refit and modernization in preparation for her recommissioning. During this overhaul, the remaining Oerlikon 20mm and Bofors 40mm anti-aircraft guns were removed, as they were no longer effective against modern threats like fighter jets and anti-ship missiles. Additionally, 2 5-inch gun mounts were taken off from the midship and aft positions on both sides of the vessel. Iowa was then moved to Ingalls Shipbuilding in Pascagoula, Mississippi, for further upgrades. Over the next several months, she was equipped with state-of-the-art weaponry, including 4 Mk-141 quad launchers for 16 Harpoon anti-ship missiles, 8 armored box launchers for 32 Tomahawk cruise missiles, and 4 Phalanx close-in weapon systems for defense against incoming missiles and aircraft. After June 1986, Iowa became the first battleship to receive the RQ-2 Pioneer Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, UAV, capable of carrying up to 8 of these drones. These UAVs replaced helicopters as spotters for her powerful 16-inch Mark 7 guns, enhancing her targeting capabilities. The modernization also included upgrades to her radar, fire control systems for her guns and missiles, and enhanced electronic warfare capabilities. This extensive refit was completed ahead of schedule and within budget, costing around $500 million. On April 28, 1984, Iowa was officially recommissioned under the command of Captain Gerald E. Necco. However, in the rush to meet the deadlines, some essential repairs to her engines and guns were not completed, and the mandatory Navy Board of Inspection and Survey in-serve inspection was bypassed to speed up her return to service. Shakedown and NATO exercises 1984 to 1989. From April to August 1984, the USS Iowa underwent a series of training exercises and naval gunfire support qualifications in the waters around Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and the Puerto Rican operating area. After a brief stop in her new home port of Norfolk, Virginia, Iowa spent the rest of 1984 and early 1985 conducting shakedown operations near Central America. During this time, she crossed the Panama Canal, operating along the west coast of Central America and even taking part in humanitarian missions in countries like El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Honduras. In April 1985, she returned to the United States for routine maintenance. In August 1985, Iowa joined 160 other ships for Exercise Ocean Safari, a NATO operation designed to test the alliance's ability to control sea lanes and ensure the free passage of shipping. Despite rough weather conditions, Iowa used the time to practice evasion techniques. She even crossed the Arctic Circle during the exercise. In October, Iowa took part in operations in the Baltic Sea, firing her array of guns, ranging from phalanx systems to her massive 16-inch cannons. She visited several European ports, including Le Havre in France, Kiel in Germany, Copenhagen in Denmark, and Oslo in Norway, where the King of Norway joined her crew for lunch. By the end of the year, she returned to the United States. On March 17, 1986, Iowa underwent an overdue inspection by the Navy Board of Inspection and Survey, INSERV. The inspection, led by Rear Admiral John D. Bulkley, highlighted several deficiencies, including the inability to reach her top speed, hydraulic leaks, and deteriorated equipment. Despite these issues, the decision was made to correct the deficiencies instead of decommissioning the ship. Iowa returned to Central America for additional exercises and maintained a visible naval presence. On July 4th, President Ronald Reagan and First Lady Nancy Reagan boarded Iowa during the International Naval Review in the Hudson River. Captain Larry Ray Sequist took command of the Battleship on April 25, 1986, during a requalification exercise off Vieques Island near Puerto Rico. In August 1986, Iowa set sail for the North Atlantic and participated in Exercise Northern Wedding in September. She supported a simulated amphibious assault by firing her main guns in rough seas at the Cape Wrath Range in Scotland. A team of Iowa Marines even went ashore to guide her fire. After the exercise, she visited ports in England and Germany before returning to the United States in October. By December 1986, Iowa was testing the Navy's new RQ-2 Pioneer Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, UAV. These drones, designed to spot targets for her big guns, proved successful and were deployed on Iowa for the first time. In early 1987, Iowa operated around Central America and conducted various exercises. In September, she sailed for the Mediterranean to join the 6th Fleet, staying until late October before heading to the North Sea. On November 25th, as part of Operation Earnest Will, she passed through the Suez Canal into the Persian Gulf, where she escorted reflagged Kuwaiti oil tankers during the Tanker War phase of the Iran-Iraq War. She continued these escort missions through the Strait of Hormuz until February 1988, when she returned to the United States. After arriving back in Norfolk on March 10, 1988, Iowa participated in Fleet Week activities and then underwent an overhaul. On May 26th, Captain Fred Muesli took command and led Iowa through a shakedown cruise in Chesapeake Bay on August 25th. Despite narrowly avoiding collisions and grounding in shallow waters, Iowa emerged undamaged. The ship continued with sea trials and training around Florida and Puerto Rico, passing the Operation Propulsion Program evaluation in October. On January 20, 1989, during an unauthorized gunnery test off Vieques Island, Iowa set a record by firing a 16-inch shell 26.9 miles, the longest range ever achieved by her main guns. In February, she visited New Orleans and returned to Norfolk before joining a fleet exercise in April. 1989. Turret explosion. On April 19, 1989, during a routine gunnery exercise, a devastating explosion occurred in the No. 2 16-inch gun turret of the USS Iowa. At 9:55 a.m., the blast ripped through the turret, killing 47 crew members. A gunner's mate in the powder magazine room acted quickly, flooding the magazine and likely preventing a catastrophic chain reaction that could have caused even more damage to the ship. Initial investigations by the Naval Investigative Service, NIS, now known as NCIS, suggested that the explosion might have been caused by one of the deceased sailors, Clayton Hartwig, in a deliberate act of sabotage. Investigators believed Hartwig had detonated an explosive device in a suicide attempt, following the alleged end of a personal relationship with another sailor. This theory was supported by various factors, including Hartwig's life insurance policy, which named Kendall Truitt as the sole beneficiary, and the discovery of unexplained materials inside the turret. Hartwig's mental state was also called into question, with claims that he was emotionally unstable. However, the investigation's findings were met with widespread skepticism, and the case continued to attract controversy. In October 1991, under pressure from Congress, the Navy was forced to reopen the investigation. This second inquiry, conducted by independent investigators, faced significant challenges since much of the original debris had been cleared away by the Navy, making it difficult to gather new evidence. Nevertheless, the new investigation suggested that the explosion was more likely the result of an accidental overramming of powder bags rather than an intentional act. Further complicating the situation, it was revealed that while Iowa was undergoing modernization in the early 1980s, the ship was rushed back into service due to the need to relieve her sister ship, New Jersey, which was deployed to Lebanon. This expedited schedule meant Iowa was recommissioned in 1984 despite being in poor condition, with crucial repairs overlooked. Moreover, Captain Fred Musilli, the commanding officer at the time, was criticized for prioritizing missile maintenance over the training and safety of the crew operating the ship's guns. Tests conducted at the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Dahlgren, Virginia, showed that the gunpowder in question, originally manufactured in the 1930s, was prone to spontaneous combustion. The powder had been improperly stored during Iowa's 1988 dry docking at Yorktown, Virginia. As the gunpowder aged, it emitted ether gas, which is highly flammable and could have been ignited by a small spark. These findings prompted the Navy to change its position on the incident. Admiral Frank Kelso, then Chief of Naval Operations, issued a public apology to the Hartwig family, acknowledging that there was no credible evidence that Clayton Hartwig had intentionally caused the explosion. The explosion remains one of the most tragic losses of life for the surface Navy during peacetime operations. It highlighted serious flaws in procedures and handling, leading the Navy to overhaul its protocols for managing gunpowder on battleships. Captain Musilli faced severe criticism for his management of the crew and the ship's readiness, but the incident ultimately reshaped safety standards across the fleet. Reserve Fleet and Museum Ship, 1990-present. With the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, the U.S. faced significant cuts to its defense budget. As a result, battleships like the USS Iowa were deemed too costly to maintain. On October 26, 1990, Iowa was decommissioned for the last time, ending her total of 19 years of commissioned service. She was the first of the reactivated battleships to be decommissioned, a decision influenced by the damage sustained to her turret. Initially berthed at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, she was later moved to Naval Station Newport in Rhode Island. From September 24, 1998 to March 8, 2001, she remained there until being towed to California by the tug Sea Victory. On April 21, 2001, she arrived in Suisun Bay near San Francisco, joining the Reserve Fleet, where she stayed until she was struck from the Naval Vessel Register again in March 2006. The National Defense Authorization Act of 1996 required the Navy to reinstate 2 Iowa-class battleships that had been struck from the Naval Vessel Register in 1995. These ships were to be kept in reserve and maintained in a state that allowed for rapid reactivation if needed for Marine Corps amphibious operations. Due to Iowa's damaged turret, the Navy chose New Jersey and Wisconsin for the reserve fleet. New Jersey had less extensive damage and was easier to reactivate. However, in 1999, the Strom-Thurmond National Defense Authorization Act mandated that Iowa and Wisconsin be listed on the Naval Vessel Register. This change meant New Jersey was to be removed from the register and turned over to a nonprofit organization to be preserved as a museum ship in New Jersey. This decision allowed New Jersey to open to the public as a museum in her namesake state in 1999. In March 2006, Iowa and Wisconsin were once again struck from the Naval Vessel Register, allowing them to be donated as museum ships. Still, concerns remained in Congress about losing the naval gunfire support that battleships like Iowa provided. This led to the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2006, which required that both ships be maintained in a state of readiness in case they were needed again. Congress also stipulated that specific measures should be in place to ensure that Iowa could be returned to active duty if required. In March 2007, the historic Ships Memorial at Pacific Square, HSMPS in Vallejo, and a group from Stockton submitted proposals to use Iowa as a museum ship. Although the HSMPS initially supported the idea of placing the ship in San Francisco, the Navy deemed their plan the only viable option in October 2007, given that the other groups failed to submit final applications. On April 25, 2009, Iowa Senate Resolution No. 19 endorsed HSMPS as the ship's custodian and supported its placement at Mare Island in Vallejo. In 2010, the Pacific Battleship Center, PBC, began advocating for Iowa to be berthed in San Pedro, Los Angeles. Initially, the Port of Los Angeles rejected this proposal because the battleship was not yet available. However, after a lengthy process, on September 6, 2011, the Navy awarded the USS Iowa to the Pacific Battleship Center for display at the Port of Los Angeles. After undergoing rehabilitation at the Port of Richmond, California, she was towed to Los Angeles in October 2011. USS Iowa opened for weekend tours starting in December 2011 while still at the Port of Richmond. Visitors could tour the ship, see exhibits such as 16-inch shells, and watch a short film about the battleship. On April 30, 2012, the U.S. Navy officially donated the USS Iowa to the Pacific Battleship Center in Los Angeles. Iowa began her final journey to the Port of Los Angeles on May 26, 2012, towed by 4 Crowley Maritime tugboats. After a brief pause off the Southern California coast to clean her hull of any invasive species, she was permanently docked on June 9, 2012, at berth 87 in San Pedro along the main channel, just south of the World Cruise Center. On July 7, 2012, the USS Iowa Museum officially opened to the public under the direction of the Pacific Battleship Center, preserving her legacy for future generations. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the incredible history of the USS Iowa. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more fascinating stories like this, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Your support helps us bring more content to history enthusiasts like you. See you in the next video.